Welcome to this episode of the Smart Leader Sell podcast. I'm Jessica Lorimer, sales coach and leadership expert. And today I am joined by my lovely COO, Chief Operating Officer, woman with all of the fancy titles, Liz Wilkins.
Hi, Jess. Thanks for having me on.
Yay! I'm so excited to have you back. And this time you're not even asking questions.
I know. You're asking me questions, like go figure.
I feel like you're being ripped off here. Well, I'm really excited because today we are finally talking and revealing all the juicy deets behind the epic, I'm going to use the word epic because it's more positive than, incredibly challenging and long-winded summer that we've just spent rebranding my business. And I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how behind the scenes you want us to actually go today.
Yeah, wow, full transparency. I mean, I'm pretty sure that I actually talked about wearing a bra versus not wearing a bra on one of my recent episodes. Who's edited that yet? We're here today to talk to you about the realities of rebranding or starting your branding and how it actually impacts your business and, most importantly, your bottom line. So let's kind of start at the beginning. It's like a little story, isn't it? There was a cool June night where we sat out after Helen Packham's event out of the front of a hotel cum bar in Brighton, looking at the sea, talking about my business. And I had just said to you, yes, I would love for you to take over and be the COO of my business. And you were like, yay. And I was really glad about that because obviously if Liz had been like, no, that sucks, I'd have been a bit screwed. You're doing a happy dance. I like this. And we talked about the first things that we wanted to do with the business and how we could scale it up. Let's kind of have a chat about that conversation so everyone knows the starting point.
Oh my goodness, I don't think I can remember that June night. It feels like a lifetime ago.
Too much work.
Yeah, lots of work later. I think I've obviously followed you and been a member of your community, the Dotties, since about February 2017. And the first online course I ever took was actually your signature program, Cash Creation.
Yeah.
Which I loved, and I'm so grateful I found you early in my online career. Otherwise, I could have spent an awful lot of money with an awful lot of coaches and not made a penny in my business. And luckily, through working with you, that's not my experience of coming online after leaving corporate. But because I had a corporate career and I worked for incredible brands that was all about the creativity, every time I looked at your brand, Jess, apart from your beautiful photos, my heart would just be like, oh no, oh really, look. And I'd be like, no, focus on the message. Don't worry about what Jess's content looks like, because actually your content is and always has been phenomenal. But as a really visual person, I struggled with the way it looked. Yeah. And actually I thought we were kind of downplaying your awesomeness. So one of the conversations we had that night was, how can we ensure that the brand that you have in the future is a reflection of where you are and where you're going?
Yeah. And I think this is really interesting because I wrote a blog about this, last week, or was published last week, and that shows my branding through the ages, if you will. And when I sent it to Liz with the images, I think Liz almost had a small kind of heart attack at, this is how I started out with, I kid you not, it looks like a kind of, after a night out, you wake up and you realize you vomited somewhere and it's that color background that I used to have on everything, because back in the day, you couldn't really get gold. You had to just do this weird, awkward last night vomit color on Canva. And that's how I started my brand, and that's what I built. And I've always stood by the fact that if your content is really good, it actually doesn't matter what it looks like. But, and I give the caveat here, after almost 4 years of running my business like that and not really caring what my content looked like, I started looking around at my peer group. I started looking at people like Janet Murray. I started looking at people like Chris Ducker, Amy Porterfield, James Wedmore from a brand perspective. And I had that like envious, oh, I have the money and I have the time to do this now. And I want my brand to start reflecting, like you say, the scale that the business has and the way that we want to move forward. And so that's kind of where we started around the branding conversation, was me being like, I just want it to look prettier instead of crap. and that was Liz's starting point. So that was the first thing we talked about. We're going to walk you through like what we've done over the last few weeks to change the brand and things like that. But one of the other things that we talked about was this idea of devaluing, devaluing the content. And, I think that's a really interesting one, because it wasn't one that honestly I'd considered before. I'm a very linear learner. I read something, I implement it, I do it. I don't care what kind of colour font it's got or what it looks like. I'm just like, great, okay, that sounds like a great idea, off I go. And so for me, actually, I resisted for a long time this idea that it looking like crap devalued the actual content or made people not want to learn, because I was just like, that's not who I am. Then I realized how infinitely selfish I was being, because obviously not everybody is me.
No, for example, I'm a really visual learner. So I think in pictures, and actually I find it a struggle to read lots and lots of long text. Yeah. Unless it's on my Kindle and it's some trashy novel, then I've got no problem. But in business terms, I like, because I am so visual, I like something that's pleasing on the eye, that's got nice subheaders, that's got bold things and things in quotes. And it's just visually appealing, because I find it easier to read. And for me, if I find it easier to read, I'm more likely to take it into my brain, and then I'm more likely to actually use that and action that content.
Exactly. So this idea of value and bottom line profit when it comes to branding, because you know that I want to touch on this.
Oh, I do.
And it's so frustrating for me as a woman, okay? And I say this with all reverence to, people who model everywhere. It is so frustrating to me that people would think having an expensive photo shoot in Paris would make you more money, okay? I've never bought into it. Don't understand it. And I completely get that having a photo shoot in Paris, I'm sure, is a very nice thing to do. Incidentally, when Sam and I went to Paris, we took 17 attempts to get a selfie underneath the Eiffel Tower. And in most of them, I genuinely do look like I've got some kind of illness. Like, I've never bought into that. And for me, when I came into this online space, it was all when people talked about your brand, and maybe this is why I've resisted it for so long. When people talked about branding, they didn't talk about things that I cared about. Which to me, when I think of branding, is about customer service, is about the way you communicate, it's about having a consistent message, it's about, yes, visuals to some degree. But everyone was like, oh, you want to build your brand? Okay, well, have a pretty website, have a photo shoot in Paris. That's you establishing yourself as a premium business owner. And I just couldn't get past it, because I've had really lovely photo shoots. And in fact, Becky Ruiz is one of the best photographers out there, and I'd highly recommend her. But I wouldn't say that my professional photos, I wouldn't say that I've ever had an email from somebody saying, I bought from you today because your professional photos are the shiz, right? Nobody's ever said that to me. Equally, nobody has ever said to me or emailed me and said, Jess, I would love to buy your program, but your Canva graphic looks like something my cat just sicked up, so I'm not going to buy it. I've never had either of those situations. And this for me was my whole thing about branding. I was like, well, what impact will it actually make on my bottom line? Because when you're building a business, especially when you're new, you can either spend a ton of money going to Paris, having your photo shoot, or you can make a ton of money with content, right? And I think this is the bit that confused me. When I was new, people wanted me to spend tons and tons of money on things that actually, like I say, they weren't contributing to my bottom line at all.
No, and if you're new in business, I do not advocate spending a fortune on glossy photos, an all singing, all dancing website, because you and I both know that unless you've got an audience, or as you would call it, traffic going to that site, it's meaningless. I've completely bought into your worldview, which is make money and then improve as you go in terms of your branding and your messaging. And when I started, I've got a very cute ninja, which a very clever illustrator friend of mine made.
I love the ninja. It has to be said, the ninja is awesome.
The ninja is awesome. And that was it. And then because I found your cash creation program, I traded on my ability to build relationships with people. And when we talk about branding, you've said something really important, that it's not just about how you look, it's about how you talk, whether you're consistent, the kind of values that you have, how you make people feel. I think sometimes we forget that behind a piece of content, be it a podcast, be it a blog, be it a Facebook Live, are people.
Yeah.
Real life people with feelings and emotions who want to connect with you. And, you know, we're not in the personal brand space, we're not building huge corporate businesses which are faceless. This is all about you as the business owner, and it's about the warts and all and realities of life and business. And knowing what I know about you, if you'd have had a very expensive photo shoot in Paris or New York, it would just be completely wrong for you and your brand. Because, you know, I've listened to lots of your content. You talk a lot about being an aspirational buyer. You know, you're not one to talk about Chanel handbags, quaffing champagne in the latest London restaurant. That's not who you are as a business owner. So for you to have imagery and visuals that were like that would be at complete odds with the real Jessica Lorimer. And we talk about authenticity, and we say, you've just got to be you. And I think this is where people can go off beam really quickly, is that they don't listen to who they are and build a business and a brand associated with that is really them.
Yeah.
Now, for me, my ninja, she's a little bit cheeky. She likes to have fun. She winks and she blinks, because that's, you know, I'm a little bit cheeky. I like to have fun. And it's reflective of me. But, you know, me in a taxi in New York, well, that would just be completely wrong, because I'm not a Fifth Avenue kind of girl.
Yeah.
Even though I do love the concrete jungle. So I think it's about building something that really reflects who you are. And it doesn't have to be expensive. This is the irony. You know, people, when they spend a lot of time thinking about what's my logo going to be. I don't care what your logo is. I would much rather you followed your profit pathway, that, you know, you had clarity on who your ideal client was. You were really clear on your messaging, who you're trying to serve and why. You knew what your product offers were, so that you can actually go there and get sales. And then you've got the relevant tech in your business to help you automate it, that's appropriate for where you are in your business journey. I would much rather people followed those 5 steps and aligned their branding accordingly.
And look at this, people. I mean, this is just the way that I brainwash. Last year, Liz has managed to memorize my entire 5-step system. And it's true. You know, I think when it comes to branding, people are so bought in, and I think it's so easy to say branding is just your font. Branding is just the colors you use. Branding is just, you know, the pictures you have, that we forget the other areas that go into it. We forget this idea of authenticity. We forget, are we building a brand that's genuinely congruent with how we are going to show up? There is no point in me being photoed in a Dolce & Gabbana dress if the majority of the time, like I do, I wear flip-flops and, you know, go braless to shops accidentally. You know, it's that kind of thing that doesn't really match the person that I am. And if you happen to go to my local supermarket, I apologize. I can't help it. Sometimes I just forget. So it's this kind of thing. You know, I think we have to really look at what experience. For me, branding is about what experience are my customers getting. Absolutely. And so for a long time, I'd focus purely on, are the customers getting value in terms of the content? Yes, tick, great. Are they getting a good customer service? Are they enjoying the experience working with my company? Yeah, tick, good, great. The thing that I fell down on was being so anti, can I make it look nice? Because if it looks nice, will people, and this was the interesting question for me, will people pay more for it? Will people value it more? Will people think it's a worthier resource because it looks nice? And, you know, I had some interesting feedback a couple of weeks ago from one of our daughters. He said, I was really happy when I took cash creation because I realized that you could have a course that looked like crap and you could make a lot of money from it, and that it worked. And when she said it, I was like, yes, and internally fist pumped, but also was like, we need to evolve. You know, your business cannot stay the same for years and years and years. And yes, I 100% believe that if you are a year in business, 2 years in business, hell, I was 4 years in business, you know, you can absolutely make do with those first points around, are your customers getting value? Are your customers enjoying the experience? After that, when you want to scale, you have to assess, okay, well, what is going to help me position my brand and my company as being the best offer in the market, or the best company or organization to work for in the market. And sometimes that does come with, as you call it, tarting things up a little bit.
Titivating, actually.
Titivating. I wasn't going to go with that after all the bra comments. But
it's really easy with branding. When you open up the world of branding, and particularly visual branding, to go down a rabbit hole. If anyone's ever been in creative market looking for, I don't know, Instagram memes and quotes, or some foils or anything, you could quite easily spend 3 hours in creative market and wonder where the morning's gone. But that isn't what this is about. You talk a lot, Jess, about consistency and how you have to be consistent. Now, when you're starting out, it's quite hard to know how to be consistent, particularly if you're getting crickets. It can be quite disheartening to spend a lot of time, creating content, blogs, social media posts. Perhaps you've started a podcast, or you've got a YouTube channel, or you're doing IG stories. Whatever it is, it can be quite disheartening if you don't get any response. But I do believe that if you have consistent look and feel, it helps people recognize you.
Yes.
We all know the marketing adage, it takes, between, and it depends what number or what article you read, between 7 and 13 marketing touches to get someone connected to you. So that means they need to see you between, 7 and 13 times. Well, guess what? If you look the same virtually each time they see you, they're more likely to recognize you. And that's all it's about, is about the being recognizable early. And you don't have to do that in an expensive, complicated way.
No.
And this is where your simple colour palette, 2 fonts, perhaps one script, perhaps one not, and just being blooming boring about it and religiously keeping the same colours and keeping the same fonts and not deviating is going to serve you well, as a new person.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because obviously going through a rebrand, generally what everyone thinks is that everything's going to change. All the fonts are going to change. All the colours are going to change. Everything's going to look different. Now, obviously, working with me, I'm somebody who I'm very stubborn about most things. And I like what I like, and I don't like what I don't like. And so actually working with me is fairly challenging because I'm very opinionated on certain things. And colours are one of those things. For me, I have always had certain colours in my business. I've always had the pink kind of colour. I've always had the teal. I've always had the gold. And then I came to you, and it was after I'd launched my book and I'd done the new book cover. And I'd done a lot of research because, I have time on my hands into what would make people pick up a book from a shelf and, what would make it stand out on the bookshelves. And I went to my local Waterstones where I hang out all the time anyway. And I was kind of looking, and the books that stood out for me were the books that had bold, plain covers, because everything else was so busy all the time and it just all melded into one. And so I'd obviously, said, I want this book cover and I just want it to be black, white, and have a gold title page, which was great in terms of printing costs, just as an FYI for anyone. Like, if you ever want to print a book, keep it simple, easy, much cheaper. But when I came to you and we started talking about my brand, I said, okay, so I want it to be classic. This is the thing. I have to have a brand that that I'm going to want to change every 5 minutes, because I'd done that. I'd done that over 4 years. I'd had really nicely professionally designed websites that after a year made my eyes hurt and I just couldn't look at it anymore. I'd had things I'd done myself that I was like, right, that's fine, but it constantly needed upgrading. And so when we started talking about branding, we started talking about this idea of classic, minimalist, what are we keeping and what's going. So let's talk about what we've actually kept, because I think we've kept quite a lot of stuff when it comes to the brand, like the pre-existing brand, if that makes sense.
We've kept virtually all of it, apart from the shocking pink, even though the shocking pink does pop up occasionally. So when we first had the conversation, you wanted something, as you just said, simple, classy, and we wanted something that would stand the test of time. Yeah. Colours are fashionable and they come and go. So we wanted something that would stand the test of time. So you already had a really simple colour palette, which was black, gold, and grey.
Yeah.
And obviously white. Really super simple. But within that, what had happened was the gold had become the predominant colour. And the challenge with gold is it can look really in your face, and it can actually look quite cheap if you're not careful. And it was just a bit all over the shop. The fonts were different, the sizes were different on things. It just looked a bit all over the place, if the truth be told. For any listeners, Jess and I have had much franker conversations about what her branding did look like, just for the record.
Yeah.
She's not looking at me surprised.
We can't use the actual words because otherwise we'd have to deem the podcast explicit. So
trying not to swear. So we wanted to keep what was working. And I think this is very often what happens with people, is that they throw away all the good stuff because they want something new. But we kept the good stuff, which was the simple palette. And what you did have on your old branding was bold colours that stand out. So how we translated that was into accent colours.
Yeah.
So, we didn't need bold colours all the time in your face shouting at us. So instead what we've done is we've taken your teal, we've toned it down a bit so it looks a bit classier, and we've kept the pink for buttons when you come to buy, because we do like the pink. It's a brilliant colour. But you won't see the pink unless Jessica's been playing behind my back in any of the branding, because it's all on that really simple, calm colour palette. And the reason is we don't want to go through the exercise that we've gone through this summer in a year's time.
No, and I think that's something that's really important for people. It's kind of like when you get a haircut. I go to my hairdresser every 6 to 8 weeks. You see in my calendar. It's a regularly scheduled thing. And every time I go, she says to me, what do you want? And every time I'm like, oh, I wish I could have something different, right? When you get that feeling like, hey, like I want to come out and I want to have that, Julia Roberts moment in Pretty Woman where everyone looks at me and I kind of flick my new hair and I feel great. And so the last, I don't know how many times I've gone and I said, I think I want something different. And she said, well, what do you want? And my hairdresser is Russian and she's absolutely lovely, but she's very, very transparent about what will look good and what will not look good. And so last time I said to her, well, I think I'd quite like a fringe. And she said, no, your face shape is not right for a fringe. And also you're too lazy for one. And I think that really sums up how I felt about this branding exercise this summer, because actually what we've done is we've gone, I came to you and I said, look, I would love to have a new brand and everything be really exciting and all that kind of stuff. And instead what we've done is go, okay, but what looks nice now?
Yeah.
Rather than risk that for something that, we might like temporarily, but in a year's time we'll probably hate. Let's look at what we keep and what we just enhance. And I think that's been the most valuable exercise for me, because looking back on 4 years of DIY branding that I wouldn't, have necessarily called branding pre-Liz, it's all the same. The colours have always been consistently the same. I've always had one script font, one non-script font. I've always had, these big bold colours. I've always used certain styles to format my sales pages and stuff. So we haven't actually changed any of that. What we've done is upgraded it to the level that I wanted to play at. And I think that's the difference, that, and that's the thing that I'd say to people who are newer in business is upgrade over time. You don't have to have the end brand now, just like you don't have to have the end products or service now that you think you will want in 5 or 10 years time, because actually it doesn't work. It's much more helpful to do it over time and do it gradually and get what you want and start understanding what makes you tick and what you like and what you don't like, rather than go all guns blazing into a big decision that you then find very difficult and very expensive to change.
Completely. And, for example, anyone who's followed your brand knows that, we haven't changed your photos, for example. The photos that we're using in the brand today are the same as you've been using for the last 2 years, the ones that Becky did. Yeah. The only thing we did was we cut you out. You're no longer against a grey wall or in a cafe or in your office. You're actually, the images are just cut out. So, and the reason we did that was we didn't want to do another branding shoot, because what you had already worked. It was good enough. And actually we hadn't utilised the images as much as we could have done. So they may look new, but actually they're 2 years old. So we've just repurposed what we already had.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, this idea of repurposing. It's not just about going out there. Rebranding is not going out and going, what can I get that's new and exciting and fancy? It's about going on looking at your brand and saying, what do I already like? What can I reuse? What makes sense for this particular decision about where I am in business?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that we've done, and again, if anyone's stalking Jess's brand, you'll see this. We've virtually templatized your entire business.
Yeah.
So if you look at any of the imagery on smartleaderssell.com, you'll see, particularly for the podcast, Mondays are either grey or either the teal or the grey. Fridays are always black outlined images, super simple, identical. And that's because the focus, we don't want to spend time creating new stuff. The point is to get efficiency in getting the content out there so you can continue to help and serve people with your free content.
That's a really interesting point, because we want to make the biggest impact. And that's what the new brand is helping us to do. So let's talk about what we've actually done. Because I know that it's been quite a lot, but there are people who won't have seen the behind the scenes. So we started out, like I say, with this branding conversation around what we were going to do with the new brand, what I wanted from it, how I wanted it to position me and my company. Then we moved forward into rebranding some pretty big things. So we started with the podcast. Did we start with the podcast?
We did, yes. So we changed the way that the podcast looks on smartleadersell.com. We changed the imagery associated with it. And I think at the time we started, we were up to episode 80 odd, something like that. Yeah.
So there you go, you've got 80 episodes of rebranding.
So there we go, 80 images off the bat, got to be changed. And here's the thing, so if you had 80 images to change on your website, I'm not talking to you, Jess, I'm talking to a listener, would you feel that, oh my, I've got to get them all done in the same week? No, we didn't. The truth of the matter is, we did the first images you could see when you landed on the page. If you clicked on any other pages of previous episodes, those images weren't updated. The only time we updated back images was if we linked to previous episodes in the show notes of the podcast. So if we, talked about, one of your top selling ones, like how to never get a no on a sales call, number 2, in case you're interested, that imagery was updated because we knew it had a lot of traffic. So actually, we didn't go on a 1 week, sleepless nights, we must get this all done in one go. We didn't have that approach. It was something that happened over time, even though we had a date where I think we said was it something like the 30th of July, officially we were rebranding. But we'd started doing some things beforehand, and on that day, the site looked different, but it didn't look perfect. And, this ties in with one of your core values, Jess, which, you talk about this all the time. It's about production, not perfection.
Mm-hmm. It's one of my favourite phrases.
And if we'd have gone down the perfection route, your website would still not be ready. And in fact, if anybody can find any images on the website that haven't been updated to the new brand, let me know. You can find me on social media and I will buy you a coffee because trust me, I'll send you a Costa coffee voucher or Starbucks, depending on where you are in the world. Because trust me, there were probably still images on your website that haven't been updated. I think the last count, we were up to 250 images that have been changed. And then, of course, when we look at the social media images and how we promote your podcast and your blog, there's those images to include as well. So, saying, oh, I'll update my podcast sounds like an easy thing to say, but when you're looking at 80 odd episodes and we're now up to 100 odd, it's a bigger task than you might think. But this is where the beauty of templates comes in. And I know I've talked about this ever since I came online. And that's because I grew up in a corporate world where you were very constrained by what you couldn't do. And the reason we were constrained is it stopped people doing stupid things with the brand. And it makes life a lot easier. So I'm all about the template. So if you're a graphic designer and you're listening to this and you're looking at Jess's brand, yes, it's templated, but guess what? This is about ease. It's about getting scale, and it's about doing it as quickly as possible.
I think that's a really important thing, like the idea of production, not perfection. I know that for me, and I know that for you, it's actually challenging. I work really quickly. And one of the things that I say to people all the time when they join my team or when they work with me, like they're coaching with me or whatever, is I work quickly and I expect everyone else to do that too. Because for me, done is better than perfect. Like that's how I was able to grow the business size in terms of revenue that I have with a brand that didn't look great, right? That's how I did it, because for me, it was all about production, not perfection. Get the content out there, get the message out there, get the important things out there, sell regularly, make the money, and then reinvest it in the things that I saw as want to haves rather than must haves. For me in my business, sales was a must have. I must be able to sell, I must be able to make money, or my business will not survive. Branding, don't get me wrong, I've looked at Marie Forleo's brand for years and thought that looks lovely and I'd love that, but it wasn't a must have, it was a want to have. It was, for me, it was one of those things that for a time I saw as an ego driven thing. And so actually having the templates has made life so much easier for us, because the speed at which I work, it's much easier to be like, hey Liz, I want this blog to go out this week instead of that one. Great, we've got a template, we just write a different title in. Fab. That's fine. It doesn't cause, it causes relatively little issue, except, heart attacks. Heart attacks all round on certain things. But it's easy, it's quick, and it works for my business and it works for my audience, because everything is recognizable. Everything is, you can look at one of the images and go, oh yeah, that's going to be a piece of Jess's content. And that's really useful for people. And it's something they didn't get before. So I think that's really important. And I think the point about the fact that we didn't do it all at once is also really important. The majority of people cannot change their brand in a week. I don't believe it. I don't think that you can, I think you can absolutely plan out your brand. I know some really good branding designers and people who can absolutely sit down with you and go through new font styles and palette colors and all this kind of stuff. But I don't think if you're somebody like me who's got a lot of content, that you can realistically expect to change everything, especially if it's not templatized, in a week or less. I just don't think it's possible.
Or you can if you throw people at the problem.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. If, the shorter your time scale for rebranding, the more expensive it is. It's simple economic, because you just have to throw more people at it. But, we took the decision to do it over August because we know that lots of your audience do actually take holiday in the summer.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. So we did it over a relatively quiet traffic time of the year. If you were looking to pivot your brand and perhaps change, I know you would never advocate doing it during the busiest sales time of the year, ever.
No.
So, when you've got big programs launching, that is not the time to do a rebrand. It's when it's a little quieter, your audience are quieter, you've got the time to do it.
And that's exactly what we did. We launched Cash Creation at the end of July. And the reason that we did the podcast images and got those done by July 30th was because we were starting the Sales in for Summer Challenge. Exactly. And we knew that people would be going and consuming the podcast, listening to the episodes. And we knew that that was the goal for us, was to have that piece sorted so that when people were listening, when they were looking, they could see the new brand that we're shaping. We sold Cash Creation, and as soon as that happened, everyone was like, great, Jess gets to take a month off, which not technically true. And we went straight into this branding mode because, like you said, a lot of my customers were away or going on holiday or doing other things. And so we knew it wasn't going to impact the service that anyone got. So if you are going to do a rebrand, if you're looking at rebranding or changing things, don't go for the busiest traffic time. Don't go for September, don't go for December, don't go for January, don't go for Easter. Because those are your key sales periods. And if you miss those because you were making everything look pretty, you will severely impact your bottom line. And that's not what a rebrand is designed to do. That's not it at all. In fact, it's designed to make things better. So one of the other things that we actually did was the emails. And we've had quite a lot of messages about the emails from people saying, we really love how the emails look now. And it's like, it's a pride and joy for Liz. So let's talk about the emails, the weekly newsletter specifically.
So if you're not on Jess's newsletter, get on it, because it's a really good kind of compendium of what's been going on in the week, and links to lots of free resources that Jess does. So if you're not on the list, this is a shout out, go join it. I've been on your email list since, well over a year. And every time I received it, it just kind of, my heart just sank a bit, because I know the value of your content, and it just felt like it was never written by you. Felt like it was produced for you, and that you hadn't actually had any input into it. And it felt very cold, because you were just talking to me about your planner and your book in the last year. So when we did the rebrand, one of the things I wanted to do was actually make the email newsletter really feel like you. So the weekly newsletter is, it's the once a week opportunity where I get to hear what's going on in your world. And I wanted to feel like I was kind of getting a little bit behind the scenes and learning what was going on. So all we simply did was, there are 3 pivotal pieces of content that you do each week: the Monday podcast, the Wednesday blog, and then the Friday podcast, which typically has a guest on it, like this episode. And in that content, there is always a thread of why those pieces have been curated and put together. And I just wanted to ensure that you were telling that story in that weekly newsletter. So the newsletter is really, really simple. Lovely verbiage from Jess, talking about the 3 pieces of content, 3 pictures, where you can find them, and then a sign off with a call to action of what you should be doing. And it's that simple. But the feedback we've had has just been fantastic.
They're phenomenal. It's been really cool to see people interact with it differently.
Yeah, and I think this is where, with your branding, we just aligned it with why people want to work with you and why they're in your community. Yeah, either paid or free. And the reason is they like the way you think and they want to learn from you. So when you create great content, we're all busy people. I want great content to be kind of brought to my attention. And that's what you do in your weekly newsletter, is you highlight what you've been up to, and specifically why I should even bother spending time, having you in my earbuds or reading your blog. So it doesn't, things like weekly newsletters don't have to be complicated. Often less is more. And people try and make things clever. They try and make things different. And actually they forget about the audience and the person reading it. So all we did was put ourselves in the shoes of someone like me who would read your newsletter. And we just said, right, what does Liz want to hear today? Well, this is what I want to hear. I'm super busy. Tell me what I need to read. We send it typically about 3:00 on a Friday, UK time, which is, when I'm having a nice cup of tea and thinking, is it the weekend yet? So I'm having that kind of down moment where I'm happy to consume content.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. And again, it's not that we've changed, we've obviously, the graphics have got a lot better on the newsletter. They are pretty sexy, it has to be said. But the newsletter itself, we've just spent more time on the story part. That's the bit of the branding that we've spent the most time on. And I think, this is the key thing. I don't want anyone to take away from this episode, rebranding is just, can we put pretty images on things and make them look nice? It's not. The branding decisions that we've made over the summer have all been around, how can we get people to have the best experience with Smart Leaders Sell? How can we make it easier for people to consume content? How can we make it more interesting? How can we make the content better for people in terms of the way that they learn and the way that they consume, and how can we make it easier and more accessible? And I think the one biggest thing that I would say that has changed, that some of you won't see because you're not in my private membership community, but one of the biggest things that has changed is the dotties. And I'm going to preface this by saying I started the dotties 2 years ago in November. I think it was either October or November. I'll have a look. We'll get a cake out for his birthday. But I started the dotties a couple of years ago, and it was my passion project. And the whole reason I started it was because I was genuinely really frustrated with the fact that I was seeing so many women online have the same business coaches, do the same activities, post 3 to 5 times a day on Facebook, do all this stuff, post the vulnerable post, do all the kind of crap that you're supposed to do, and not see results. And it was really frustrating to me, because what would happen is that people were spending tens of thousands of dollars on hiring somebody that could not help them. And then they got to this point of frustration in their business where they thought, well, I just can't do this now. It's not possible for me. and they didn't have the money, they didn't have the financial resources to actually be able to go and fix the problem and get decent advice or decent support from anywhere. There was no, community for women who were like, I just want to show up somewhere and not have to be my client facing self. I want to say I've had a good day, I've had a bad day, ask for constructive feedback, all those things. There wasn't anything out there. There were tons of membership sites. They all looked really pretty and they all had, lots of great things and great content, but they didn't have what I needed people to have, which ultimately was actionable content that got people results. So when I created the Dotties, and the Dottie's been through a few iterations, technology wise.
Yeah.
So it actually started on ClickFunnels. And you might remember this, you might have joined us as we had ClickFunnels. And it was just, ClickFunnels, despite having the capability to host courses and memberships, is very, very good at funnel building. But the experience that the customer gets through a course or a membership hosted on ClickFunnels is not the same as if they were in a membership site that was curated and produced for that particular community. It just isn't. It's very linear. You can put as much content in as you want, but it's very difficult to customize. You can't put graphics in, etc., etc. So we started on ClickFunnels and it was this linear experience and there was just tons and tons of content. Then we moved it over to Invanto at I want to say the beginning of last year, probably a little bit later actually, about 3 or 4 months into the year last year. And Invanto was better, right? I bought Invanto from an AppSumo deal because, as we all know, AppSumo bingeaholic. Liz has banned me from buying anything else on there for like the next 6 months because we have too much tech. But I bought Invanto and we moved everything over to there. And that was, it had a bit more customization, didn't it? We could make it look a bit prettier. You could have graphics. It was designed to be a membership platform. And in some ways that made it easier. The user experience was better. We could track what people were looking at and accessing content-wise, what they weren't, all that good stuff. But that had its flaws, and those flaws were recognized earlier this year when, they started obviously making big changes to their business model. And we found that, the membership site was getting to have too many members. And it was kind of, the site was then working slower and it was having downtime issues that we couldn't have for the people in the membership. It just didn't work. We needed a site that could be up and running all the time and that could still run the huge graphic files, huge video files, all that kind of thing, but have this 100% uptime rate. That was something that's really important. So we moved over to MemberVault, 2 months ago?
August, I believe it was.
August, okay. So August we moved over. And we've had an episode with Mike and Erin and we've talked about, how amazing it was. We were able to move over, in kind of 3 days of pain. Not the MemberVault part, the curating the rest of the content and doing all that. And we made it look different again. We put into place these roadmaps and made it easier for people to access different pieces of content, to know exactly what they're doing and when. And, it made it much easier for people to just take action on what they need rather than being bombarded with 400 odd pieces of content and leaving them to fend for their own selves. And I think when we look at the branding that we've done over the summer and this idea of it being based on customer experience, user experience, the story, the way that we're showing up, the way that we're trying to make it easy and more convenient for our customers and our learners, that's probably the biggest change that I've seen in terms of the brand over the last 8 to 12 weeks.
Yeah, let's be honest, and everything is Googleable.
Yeah.
Everything. Or as Marie Forleo, I love her too, would say, everything's figure-outable. And it is. When you join the Dotties community, you don't need another content repository with 3,000 bits of content where you've got to read stuff. When you join the Dotties, and I'm saying this from personal experience, I wanted to know how to sell more effectively because that's what you're absolutely brilliant at. And I wanted to know the steps I needed to take to build a bigger, more sustainable, long-term business. And guess what? You absolutely delivered on that. Over the time that, you've just shared about, changing the tech, the tech is there to support you in your mission, which is, to help women have an impact and have an income. Mm-hmm. Because we all know that wealthy women change the world. Yeah. So, the branding is there just to support your core business mission. That's it. And we choose the best technology and the best services to support that. We curate your content. And because Jess is a prolific content creator, I'm constantly saying, no, we don't need that today. No, it's all right. In fact, overnight, we've had 3 more opt-ins, I think.
Yeah.
Created. Great, marvellous. So actually, it's about less is more often. Because, when people, I know my experience with joining the Dotties was I was kind of starting to get really overwhelmed with all the online noise and the people saying, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And I'd kind of forgotten my corporate background and history. And thanks to you and the community, I got to understand who I was. And I reminded myself who I was. And I hadn't just left my 25 years of corporate experience because I'd moved offices physically. I love the Dotties. I'm a huge advocate, and I'm not saying that because I'm your COO. I'm saying that because I've built a community and a network of women that I know have my back. Am I friends with every single person in the Dotties? No. Do I need to be? No. Am I, do I engage with people? Do I have fun in there? Absolutely. But I've got a core group of women that I've met in the Dotties that I know have my back in any situation. And for a girl that went to an all-girls school, I can tell you it's a lovely experience to have.
I think, this is the thing. People often ask me, when they come into the Dotties, people always say to me, or when they come into one of my programs, you have this ability to create and curate really nice communities. And I would love to say that it's a skill or a talent of mine. And I honestly don't believe that it is. I think my talent is in working out what my brand as a business stood for and consistently saying that loud enough so that the people who needed to hear it would come along and be part of it. That's the skill. And that's what I really want you to take away from this episode. It is, yes, absolutely branding. The fun bits are around your fonts, around your colors, around the way that you make things look so that people can find you and can recognize you. And, that you have this business that does stand out from the crowd. But the profitable part of branding is this ability to show up consistently. And like Chris Ducker says, attract the best and repel the rest. It's about sharing your message consistently and loudly so that the people who need to hear it so that it gets out there and it brings them together, whether that's on your email list, in your Facebook group, on a podcast subscriber list, in a paid community. It doesn't matter. It's just that you bring those people together and you say, hey, look, you're not alone. And that to me is what a good brand does. And that's what I think we've spent the summer curating and making better.
Completely agree. And if you Interbrand do this annual report of all the global brands, and they rank the top 100 brands in the world. And what they do is that they look at the revenue associated with those brands. The reason people invest a lot of money in branding is because it helps their bottom line. But, and this is the huge caveat, it doesn't help your bottom line if you're new to business, you've got limited funds, and you haven't actually got a client base. And I think this is where the online space has gone completely bonkers and kind of indoctrinated women and men that come online saying, you must have a website, it must be beautiful, you must have branded photos, you must have this, you must have that. That's absolute poppycockle. Poppycockle indeed. I don't believe it. It's about, you don't have a business unless you sell something and you have clients. And that's why, outside of being your COO, I'm forever grateful, Jess, that I found you, because otherwise I could be back in a corporate job right now. And today I don't need to be because I found the Dotties. So if for any listeners out there, if you're struggling, if you're online and it feels quite lonely, you don't know where to go to get the best advice, perhaps you've had some bad experience with some coaches, come join the Dotties. It's £45 a month. And if you're looking at the new iPhone X Max, it's a cheaper monthly investment than buying an iPhone X Max from Apple, and you'll get a lot better return. You don't need a new smart camera on your iPhone. What you need is solid business advice from people who've been there and done that. You need people that are going to have your back when you need it. And if you need to suck it up, princess, just do the work, you'll get that too.
There we go. Isn't it great when you have someone else sell for you? Everyone listening is like, damn it, why can't Liz work on my team and sell for me? But it is true, you know, and I'm hugely grateful. I think the work we've done this summer has been phenomenal. I know that you've put in a ton of effort. I know that equally so has everyone on the team, and it's been a massive joint operation for everybody, and I'm really excited that we've pulled it off, and I'm really excited to see where it goes next, you know. So thank you for kind of putting up with my insane late night crazy ideas and actioning them the next morning, and not killing me every time I create a new opt-in. I'm just like, yeah, let's just brand that, let's just make it look pretty.
But the good news is there's some really cool stuff that's coming out. I don't know if it'll be out by the time we release this episode.
We'll have a couple of bits out, I think.
If we've got the new cool stuff out, I'll make sure it's in the show notes, because if you want to kind of look at the latest elements of Jess's brand and how it's evolving, even from August, you know, come and check it out. Because the reality is, you know, experiences, you know, if brand is about experience, the experience has to evolve as the business evolves, and sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. But in your case, quickly.
Rapido. So there you go. If you want to grab some swipe files or some new freebies, because yes, we have finally, after 2.5 years of having the same freebies, started revamping and creating new ones for you. If you want to go and grab those, make sure that you are on the email list. If the freebies are ready by the time this episode goes to air, then we'll make sure the links are in the show notes for you. If not, get yourself signed up to the weekly newsletter. Grab all of the free content. We send you an email every single Friday and let you know what best free content I'm putting out onto the market that week. And then you will be the first to know when we have the new free content coming. Thank you so much, Liz, for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's been epic to be transparent about what's going on behind the scenes and what is to come. And I really appreciate you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Welcome. So if you've enjoyed that episode and you want to hear more about the brand, you want to get to know Liz, you want to get to know me a bit better, then make sure that you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. And obviously, if you have enjoyed the episode and you would like to leave us a little review, you can hit that really awkward button on iTunes that is quite difficult to find. I'm thinking about creating a Loom video for it, and you can leave us a little review and let us know how we did. I'll see you in Monday's episode. We'll be talking all about a particularly controversial topic, so let me know how you get on.